Hello, friends and family. Welcome back to another episode of the Mental Corner podcast, the show where I bring on guests from all different backgrounds to talk all the things mental health. I'm your host, Harry Potvin, and today I have the absolute pleasure of being joined by Coralee Allaert. Coralee is a university swimmer, an open water swimmer, and a mental health advocate who is gearing up to swim across Lake Erie during the October 1st to 3rd weekend. Coralee was such a blast to talk to, and this interview was super important, not just because we talk about youth mental health, which is a growing discussion, but also because we dive into her traumatic experiences with previous coaches and like kind of getting isolated once news came out and things like this. This is a topic that does not get enough light, in my opinion, and it you see it time and time again in the news and media, like the gymnastics coach that was just announced in the States previously. Like, this is a topic that needs to be talked about. And I just really appreciate Coralee for her bravery and her openness to discuss this, because it is one that needs to be heard more. So thank you so much, Coralee, for coming on. I had such a blast talking to you. Now, before we get into the episode today, guys, you know the drill. If you're listening, please like, comment, share, subscribe, give 5 stars if you're on that podcast platform. Share with someone who might want to hear this episode. It's a really great one, and I can't wait for you to listen. I'll talk to y'all very soon. Have a great rest of your day. Peace. So my first question for you is what started you, what let me rephrase that. What got you inspired to become a mental health advocate?
In February of 2021, I was going through a rough time, just like with mental health issues and just losing the loss of motivation, to just do daily tasks. Like if it's where to get out of bed, make your bed, eat food, take a shower, go for a walk, study. And I just got to a really low point in my life where I reached out to a good friend and mentor of mine, Larry Optis, because he's an elite cyclist. He's done Race Across America, and a bunch of international cycling races. So he's an endurance athlete himself. So I reached out to him just asking for guidance of like, how do I get myself out of this position? And he knew my previous athletic background, with Wrestling Canada, in previous swimming at other universities. And he reached out to jack.org, on his behalf and on my behalf of like, what can we do to help support Coralee through this tough time? And we just came up with getting into marathon swimming or swimming in general, because when you go from being a high level athlete to having that ripped away from you, you lose your sense of purpose and identity. And that's what happened with me. And that's why I got to a low point. So for him to come up with this challenge, come up with this swim, kind of gave me a sense of meaning and purpose to, I don't know, continue life. When you start seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, you start believing that things can happen, but it's not going to happen overnight. It can take 6 months, it can take a year. So like this journey of swimming has definitely like improved my mental health, and just putting my story out there in a positive way to, show others and to inspire others that it's okay not to be okay. It's okay to struggle, but if you find a task or something you're passionate about and work towards it, things will get better. But it takes a lot of training and therapy and work.
Yeah, no, they definitely there needs to be more emphasis, and I say this a lot on the show. There needs to be more emphasis on how much work it takes. Like you can get there, you can get to a point where you're not feeling so low anymore, but you know, there's work that comes with that, just like anything else. And I think sport is a great kind of like, it's a great way for kids to learn that, and great way for like youth to learn that, like, because you can't just, well, some people can, but you can't just go into a sport and just automatically be talented. Some people are, and those people annoy people like myself who had to work hard. But you know, a lot of hard work comes with success in any field. So I guess, so when you were experiencing that low point, and like you were dealing with depression and anxiety and things like that. Was that were you wrestling at the time? Like, is that when it kind of started?
Um, well, my whole like my how do I really phrase this in a way that's not too triggering? So, um, it started back in June of 2019, when something happened between my wrestling coach and myself.
Mm.
If you've heard of Athlete A or what's going on in USA Gymnastics, that's what happened to me with my coach. So when that happened, I basically lost myself, didn't know how to cope, and then you're doing tons of reporting and this and that, and basically, in a sense, being like thrown to the gutters in the wrestling community and not being welcomed anymore. Because when an athlete speaks out, coaches and officials and whatnot, um, they don't really believe athletes for some reason. I honestly I don't know why they don't, but that's just literally sport. It's happened in gymnastics, swimming, wrestling, taekwondo most recently. And honestly, like if athletes don't talk about it, there's never going to be change. And unfortunately, like we have to put pressure on the sporting associations, but so far nothing's really happening with that. But yeah, like I fell in a dark place in June, got worse and worse and worse. And then that's when in February I was like, it's either I reach out now or there's a possibility of like somebody planning my funeral. So I took it upon myself to just reach out and try and get some sort of help or guidance of getting back in athletics. Like, obviously, at the end of the day, I would want to get back into wrestling, but for my mental health, that's never going to happen. So it's like, what other sport am I good at where I can transition from wrestling into a different sport and I don't know, not make Team Canada again, but do something big and ambiguous. And after doing marathon swimming for I started like 6 months ago, like making a university squad and whatnot, like people would be astonished. And there's open water marathon swimmers out there that are like, you just joined the sport and now you're crossing Great Lakes. It takes people like 3 to 5 years to even like train and do it. But there's people in the community that are like, you have like an elite athlete background, you have the mentality and the mindset of doing it. It's just going from a traumatic experience and putting myself through it. And also, I feel like it's easier for me to train for these swims because it's free therapy. I find I get in the water, my problems and everything go away for the 1 to 8 hours I'm swimming in the water. But then the hard thing about that is when you get out, your problems come back to you, and it's just trying to find a coping mechanism of like, okay, I know how to deal with it in the water, but how do I deal with it outside of the water?
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, yeah, that loss of identity that you're talking about is such a real thing for athletes. When when you're going through all of this mess with Wrestling Canada and stuff, how long were you wrestling after that? Was it kind of just you said no, I can't do this anymore, or did you try to stay on for a little bit after that?
I tried to stay on. So, in August of that year, I was signed to the University of New Brunswick on their varsity Reds wrestling team. And I wrestled with them until about November, December. And the coach pulled me aside and basically said, like, I think it's best for your mental health if you don't wrestle this season. Um, in quotations, he said I was the elephant in the room, and that it was best for me and the team that I wasn't there because my issues would come in the room and like it would be outside of the room too because everybody knows about what happened in the wrestling community. Like personally, I don't talk about it, but the coach talks and then it floods everywhere and it was just too much because I would go to competitions and instead of being mentally focused on the matches I have that day, I'm focused on if he's there, if he's going to show up, and stuff like that. So mentally I'm not in the right mindset and then my performance of making podium most tournaments, I would basically come dead last at most tournaments. So it basically felt like I was sabotaging my own career by like continuing with wrestling of like, okay, I know what I'm capable of, but what's going on in my personal life is affecting my performance now. And so then I left the varsity Reds wrestling team once the coach basically said, we don't want you to wrestle anymore. Take the season off. We'll reevaluate you in like January, February of 2020. So then I got fed up with that decision. And then I was like, okay, like I have to wrestle because it's just an outlet for me. Because without wrestling, I have no identity, no purpose, no nothing. So then I reached out to Guelph, McMaster, York, Brock. I reached out to various wrestling programs within Canada. And then I reached out to some in the States of like, hey, this is my situation. I want to wrestle. Can you take me on in January? So then a lot of coaches denied me and said no because they knew what was happening in the Wrestling Association. Because people are afraid to be, they don't want to coach me because of what's going on. And I don't think that's really fair. And so then I got a hold of Doug Cox with Guelph at the university here. And in a way, he was like, yeah, like you can come practices in January and whatever, but like the team's already been named and whatnot. So I could train with them or practice with them and then get better to join the season for the September of 2020. So then I get there, and he basically is like, if I were you, I would take care of your mental health, get whatever legal sorted out, and then decide to come back. And then there was a period in between like March, April, May where I was like, you know what, like if wrestling hurt me this much and wrestling, the association doesn't want to stand up for athletes, protect athletes, follow safe sport, making ethical decisions. Like they have all these regimens in place and they teach it to us because I'm an official in the sport and I am a coach in the sport. It's like they tell us as coaches and officials this and they tell athletes this, but nobody follows it. People know about it. They put it under the rug as if it never happened. And then when an athlete speaks out, it's like, well, she must be lying. Like, how is this possible? It's possible. You guys just have a hard time acknowledging shit can happen. And with me, I just don't want to be a part of an organization that is like that. And I'm about safe sport. I'm about like the pairs of two, the rule of two of like, okay, if a female athlete or a male athlete has to meet with their coach to protect the athlete and the coach, you meet in pairs of two or an open area. But a lot of coaches are like, oh, just come to like my office or whatever. And like that's where stuff happens. But people don't want to acknowledge that.
Yeah, it's because I just became registered as a coach too, and you have these courses in place like making ethical decisions, like you said, and safe sport, and they're great courses, and like they're pretty easy to understand, and most of the stuff, personally, like it's pretty common sense, and still stuff like this happens, and it's wild to me to hear this that like other coaches hear your story and hear what you've gone through and go, I don't want to deal with that, like you may be lying. Like that just seems so strange to me. And there was something similar. I had a girl from the States come on, and she was on a hockey team and she was experiencing suicidal thoughts. It's not really similar, but in a way it kind of is, because there's got to be an improvement with coaches around not just Canada, but around most of sport in general. There's got to be an improvement, because for her, she was experiencing suicidal thoughts, and the coach told her she couldn't be on the team anymore because it made other girls uncomfortable, and he didn't want to have to deal with that. So it's like, whether it's that or what you experienced and coaches don't believe you or they don't want to be a part of it, there's a huge problem going on. And it's National Coaches Week. What a great time to talk about it. But like it's interesting hearing stuff like that, because for most athletes, and I'm sure you can relate to this as much as I did, like a coach at times, not that my family was great, but when you're off at university, a coach is almost the only parental figure you have, and you look up to them, especially when you're in the sport for so long. So there's got to be an improvement, because there's a lot of kids that look up to these people.
Yeah.
Man. So when you're done wrestling, what like when you're talking about transitioning into swimming, was it like an intimidating transition, or was it just kind of like this is what I have to do now?
Um, in a way, like I swam in high school, I swam in university with wrestling. So I always was a swimmer. I just did it like on the side from wrestling in the off season of just like maintenance and keeping in touch because I can't run anymore because of I've had like 6 or 7 knee surgeries. So I can't run. Walking long distances hurt. Cycling. I had a really bad cycling accident in 2017, so I'm honestly afraid to get back on the bike. Might get there eventually. I'm working on it, but it was like, what can I do to keep in shape that's basically can't give me a concussion, can't give me another knee surgery, and something that I have like experience in. So I was like, okay, I can get into this swimming gig. But to be honest, swimming in a pool I find like extremely boring. It's like you can do short course, you can do long course, and it's boring like doing the flip turns like every like I don't know 50 seconds to like a minute and 30 depending on the course you're on. And it's just boring. And then I was like, how can I make this challenging? Because in wrestling, you're challenged every day on the mat, 3 times a day, morning, afternoon, evening. Like you're working on like one specific drill. Like you could be doing single legs, and the coach is like, you're doing this for 2 hours straight, and you're working on your technique, and your takedowns, and this and that. So it's like swimming in a pool is repetitive, it's continuous. You're not really challenging yourself, I would in the sport of wrestling. So then I was like, okay, how can I make swimming challenging and beneficial for me where I can actually enjoy a sport? So then I did a few open water swims when I was a kid, like as on a relay team. And I was like, okay, like I could do open water swimming. It wasn't even on my radar until Larry mentioned it to me. He's like, well, why don't you swim across Lake Ontario? And I'm like, well, that's open water swimming. Like, that's like 52 kilometers. Like, that's just completely absurd and nuts. Like, I don't think I can do it. And I was like, okay, well, when people mention something to me of like, oh, why don't you give this a shot? Me as an athlete is like, if you mention it, might as well just try it out. If I like it, I like it. If I don't, then I at least attempted in doing it. So I gave it a shot. February and March, I started my training for it. And then I go back to it. Like, you know what? Like, if you want to reach out to jack.org and these international organizations and charities and whatnot, I'm willing to give this thing an attempt because with open water marathon swimming, there's various conditions and you're pushed. So you can be swimming in swells, chops, waves, currents. Honestly, I hate currents.
Mm.
I hate waves. I hate chop. I honestly hate it all, but I love it at the same time. Like it pushes you beyond your limits, and it basically, in a way, makes you realize the potential that you have in the sport. There's pain and agony involved. There's a lot more involved, and it's like what I experienced in wrestling, pain and agony wise, and like that mental toughness, that's in open water swimming. But for me, swimmers might get that for pool swimming, but for me, pool swimming is just like feels recreational. I'm not challenged at all. So,
Mm. Yeah, no, all those challenges you said, and I we mentioned this off air, but that's exactly why I was a pool swimmer because I hit a current, I hit a swell, I'm like, no, that's it, I'm good, no, thank you. So when you're training for open water swimming, all of this, and you like, let's say you hit a current that's challenging to push back because currents are underrated. People are like, oh, if you know how to swim, you should be fine. Well, man, the ocean and the lakes, they're pretty strong, man. Like we're just people. So when you hit these currents or these swells or anything, like how do you persevere through? Like how, because it can be so mentally challenging to fight that when you're already exhausted.
Yeah, so during my trial swim, so in order to cross Lake Ontario, you have to swim a 16-kilometer trial swim just to prove to the board that you're mentally, you're physically, you're emotionally fit to cross the lake. So you have a swim master and your coach is there. And unfortunately, like during those conditions, to an average marathon swimmer that has tons of experience in open water swimming, the conditions I swam in would have been easy. To them, it would have been nothing. But for me, as a beginner in the sport, swimming in those 5 foot swells, the winds coming and going, and boat traffic and stuff like that, it was a challenging swim for me. It was character building, it was everything. And I knew for that swim, I had to swim 8K out from basically Coronation Park towards Maple Grove. So basically, we're in Oakville, and like, oh, so we're swimming 8K shoreline. And then I have the swells against me for 4 hours or so. And then, so basically, you swim against it, and then the goal is to ride it back to just increase your time. So, what happened during the trial swim is I fought it out, and then when we're at the 8K and they basically give me the signal we're going back, I was against it coming back. So, in a way, it wasn't the swim I anticipated. By the SSO, I failed the trial swim. I didn't qualify for Lake Ontario. But my entire team basically told me, like, this is not a failure. This is you learning yourself as a swimmer, you becoming better. Telling me it was a completely fantastic trial swim. I just missed the merger by 6 minutes. I failed by 6 minutes time wise. They were willing to advocate to the board to let me go across the lake. But I sat back with myself for 3 days, just deciding, like, you know what? If I struggled in these swells at 5 feet for 6 hours and 53 minutes, and it's 16K. Basically, take that times it by three. Can I do that swim 3 more times to get across the lake? And my mind said, you're not ready for it. So then I go back and say, okay, I'm not ready for Lake Ontario. I thought I was before. And sometimes as an athlete, you become like naive and you think like you can do anything because it's just how we are. So it's like, oh yeah, like I can do it, this, that. But realistically, you can't do it until you at least do an attempt or you try. So the trial swim was telling me information about myself and my body that okay, if I'm at 15 kilometers in this trial swim and I can't move another arm because my shoulders, my pecs, my legs are just completely done, how can I swim 33 more kilometers? You can't. So it was like I go back to my team, reflect with myself, and it was like, okay, I want to do a crossing this year. Lake Ontario, I'm not ready for. I probably need another solid year of training, of just fixing my stroke, fixing my pace, learning to breathe in the trough better because I breathe too high at times. So like that creates neck issues and whatever. So it's basically fixing all the mechanical stuff to make it smooth sailing. So I go back to my team and I'm like, okay, well, what can we do for crossing this year? So they all came back to me. They're like, well, we can do Lake Erie. There's a traditional route of 20 kilometers. But for me, I've done training swims from 0 to 20K. So doing a 20K crossing wouldn't be pushing myself necessarily. So I was like, okay, I don't want to do 20K because I wouldn't be mentally and physically pushing myself. It would just be another swim that I've done before, but on a crossing. So then they're like, okay, well, we can create a new route that's never been done by anybody. So in that, I actually like that idea. So the route was 30.57 kilometers. And for me, I like the idea of that is because I'm creating a new horizon for others to attempt. My brand name of the swim is Beyond Horizon. So in a way of me looking at the swim is I go from one point to another point and creating this new route, not just to prove to myself that I can do something new, but it's for others to attempt in the future. And then as training progressed and whatever conditions changed, in August, lake gets colder, stuff like that, wind conditions in August, September, and October. It's hard to find a weather window to go out on the lake for 12 to 15 hours right now. If this was planning in like June, July, sure, no problem. So right now we're in like the loophole of like, okay, our plan was to do the record swim of creating this new route on the lake. But because trying to find a 12 to 15-hour weather window to go out is hard, they're like realistically, if you want to do a crossing this year, because of the waves and whatever, because Lake Erie flips in a matter of seconds. Like it could be calling for nothing. You can have a flat lake, and then within 10 minutes, you have 5 foot waves, 6 foot waves. Like
Hmm.
it's a pretty shallow lake. So they're like, if you want a crossing this year, ideally do the traditional route and then train throughout the school year with the University of Guelph, work with the coaches, they'll fix everything you need to get done to make you a better swimmer, and then do the record swim in July and use that as your trial swim for Lake Ontario, and then swim across Lake Ontario. So the goal is to do the traditional route. It was supposed to be today, but it got canceled because of weather. So now we're doing it the 1st to the 3rd of October, and then doing the 2 crossings next year.
Wow. So, man, just thinking about crossing a lake is just insane to me. And I mean, you've got some of the best trainers in the world. Little plug to Guelph there, so you should be fine to go. But so, was there a reason why you picked August/October to swim, or did that just is that just how your training kind of aligned with it? Like, why not?
Um,
Why not June or July?
I wouldn't have been ready
Right. Yeah.
any body of water in June or July. So the idea was to do the end of August, just before going back to university because excuse me, there's other swimmers signed up to cross the Great Lake. So they already booked the window. So you can't overlap with them. So basically it's in the when you put in your application, it's first come, first serve. So the first one to put in their application, they pick, I don't know, for example, August 3rd to 6th, they have that window. You cannot overlap that window. So basically when I put in my application forward, it was just the end of August of what we had left. And then we were set to go, ready to go, and then 48 hours before, the pilot contacts me, and the crew was like, unfortunately, there's severe thunderstorms with like a 70% chance. I don't want to put you in the water for you to cross, and then it get evacuated and you don't get a crossing. So it was canceled because of thunder, and then they postponed it to this weekend. And then I found out last night that like the waves and the winds are horrific. So it's 20 to 25 knot winds going to west. So basically that's bad for us if we're going from south to north, because you don't want west winds coming on the east side of the lake because I'm crossing the eastern part of Lake Erie, and the eastern part of Lake Erie is like the small little bit, and then you have like it's kind of like from Detroit, it's big. If you look on the map, it's big, and then towards the west it gets smaller. So we're dealing with like that little segment. So when the waves come from the west end, it basically like just rolls the lake, and it's pretty bad. So they canceled it because the knots were bad. If you look on Windfinder now, it projects to becoming 8 foot waves, and that's completely like unsafe to swim in. And like with my training, like I'm only comfortable swimming in 2 to 3 foot waves for a small period of time. But if you have to swim in 2 to 3 foot waves for 8 to 9 hours, that's not fun at all. So they were just trying to take into consideration of like, where's Coralie's training? What can she handle? To try and get me across that Great Lake. And If it's not safe for the crew, it's not safe for me. And ultimately, like they want swimmers to be successful on an attempt. They're not going to put a swimmer out there to fail. So when I talked to the pilot last night, she basically was saying like, it looks awful. I don't want to go on a crossing and have it evacuated 1 kilometer from the finish, or I don't want you to be in a position where you mentally, like, you think you can do it, handle it, whatever, and then it's just too much for you and you have to terminate a swim. Because realistically, like mentally wise, it might bring me down if I'm not successful. But in a way, how to play with the mentality of that is no matter what happens on the Great Lake when I end up crossing next week now because of the postponement, is it's never going to be a failure. The only reason why I would fail is if I purposely touch the boat to end it or tell them, you know what, I'm done. I want to get pulled. I cannot. But if it's pulled for weather or if it's pulled for medical, like if it's pulled for a reason beyond my control, that's not a failure. It's only a failure if I say I'm done, I'm out. And I just have to keep that mindset of there's more things to go wrong where you can have a failed attempt than there is for more things to go right and for you to be successful.
Right, yeah. And I was actually just going to bring that up because, as athletes, when you're training for so long, you're kind of ready to go when you have that date in mind. So even though these factors are out of your control, like you can't obviously control the weather, so it's not up to you if that swim is rescheduled or not. But when you hear that reschedulement, like, is there any kind of frustration that comes with that? Or is it just kind of like, oh, well, I guess we're going to train until the next time?
Realistically, when I was ready to go for the August 27th to 29th window, and then I got the confirmation that it was off, and basically you have a training plan leading up. So you follow that training plan pretty strict. You know what swims you do on what day, what your goals are that day, and whatnot. And then the week before the crossing, you start your taper. So my last swim was 20 kilometers, and then I started my taper for an entire week resting. So when I got the call saying, "Okay, your swim is postponed to another day because of weather," you have to start training again. What really went in my head was, I don't want to train. Like my training's done. I don't want to get back in the water. Like, and then when you have to end your taper and begin training, like ramping up distance, working on endurance, all this, you're just like, in a way, I became a better swimmer in since it was postponed to now. Like my endurance is much better than what it was before. So my coach and the swim master worked me effortlessly, like hard. So they were looking at my 5K open water times and my 5K pool time. So they're like, okay, your 5K pool time is like 1 hour and I think it was like 143, 144. And they're like, okay, your pace is slow, so we need to work on your pace in the pool because if we do that, then your pace will be faster in open water. So they're like, okay, do a 5K pool swim continuous, like no stopping, no pull buoy, no nothing. You're just going and you're doing it, and there's no stopping for water. You're just doing it. So I did it, and then I did it in 3:37. So then the next day, they're like, okay, go do it again and I'm already tired and exhausted. So I go do it again and then I do it in 3:34. So I'm making improvements in regimens. And then I actually ended up doing like a personal best for a 5K full time in an hour 31. And the thing is, in a way, I was upset that the initial crossing date was canceled because I had to ramp up training and do all this again. But in a way, I look at it in a sense of it's an extra month for me to become a better swimmer. Maybe it can improve my time on crossing the Great Lake. And I thought about a way of maybe this is just Mother Nature telling me that she doesn't think I'm ready to cross her Great Lake, and I need 4 more weeks of training to prove to her that I'm worthy of this crossing. So instead of taking it as a negative and being upset about it and whatnot, I was like, how can I change this to a positive? And that's what I had to do is put myself in a positive mindset to get back into training. And it took me about 3 days to get in the pool or get in the lake and actually swim. Like I completely like mentally shut down. And then I was just trying to get motivated. Okay, like this is the goal. I'm swimming it for Jack.org. I'm doing this for myself and all the other people that have lost their lives to suicide. So I can't let them down, and I have to stick to my word of doing this crossing. So it took me 3 days to get back in. And then getting the news yesterday that there's no crossing for this weekend, I'm like, we have practice at 1 o'clock today, and I'm like, I really don't even want to swim today or tomorrow or this weekend, because I literally it messes with your training. So it's like I was on a 3 day taper, and now the taper ends today, and I have to start training again. It's like, how do I ramp up training for 3 to 4 days and then start a taper again? It's just like it's taxing on your body to say the least. So
Yeah, no, definitely. I can see how that could almost be more exhausting. Now, when it comes to rescheduling and then trying to motivate yourself to get back in the pool to train again, how, cuz swimming is an individual sport, like it is, but I think the impact that a team has or like a small group has is often overlooked because people just think it's one person racing when in reality there's people behind them that are supporting them and helping them through training. So how much did your own team like impact you in this whole training process?
training wise, my coach Larry, he would be available most days to talk with me through the whole like mental training, nutrition training, everything. I would have bad days, and I would just reach out to him saying, you know what, like I can't swim today, like this is going on, and he would tell me like you need to train, you need to do this, you need to eat healthy, because you have to take care of your body and your mental health first. Because if you don't do that, then there's no such thing as crossing the Great Lake or crossing any body of water, because you have to be physically and mentally fit to do something like this. Um, and so there's days where I would talk to him, or it would be like the weeks leading up to the trial swim of me just freaking out, like I don't think I can do this. I don't know. Like I don't know if I should do this. You're just questioning yourself. And I remember in those moments, like leading up to the crossing, first attempt in August, it was like a week before, like I was like panicking. I'm like, I don't know. And I called him, we met up in person, and we did a bunch of like coaching stuff of like, you're ready, you've done the work, you've done the training, you just have to go execute it on the lake. And then basically, as a swimmer and as somebody who does, I don't know, absurd stuff like crossing a body of water, you have doubts in your own abilities. But the second that somebody is like, I believe you can do this, you can do this, you have a team to support you, you don't believe in yourself anymore. You basically surround yourself with your team, and if your entire team of 16 people are telling you the same thing, but your head's telling you otherwise, focus on those 16 people. And then I have training partners too. So there's Jillian Best. She actually crossed Lake Ontario in August, and she's been training with me, and just being like a good friend and support when my coach can't be there. My swim master is another one where she'll look at my times and be like, hey, you need to be faster, you need to do this, or just make sure I'm training in the right conditions to get me ready. So yeah, there's a lot of people involved. People don't know about them, but they're in the back corner, they help a lot. Another one is like my sponsors. So like they're there 24/7 supporting me, like nutrition wise, mental health wise, checking in on how I'm doing. It's like when you get isolated in a wrestling community from what happened and then you transfer into swimming, it's like they welcome you with open arms. They accept what happened to you and they believe you. And it's like, I don't know, just having Larry invest in me in February of like, I support, I validate, I believe you. I'm sorry that all of this happened to you. And basically being the first person in literally 2 years to just believe that I can do something basically gave me that vouch that, you know what? if he's the only light I see right now to get me out of this place, I need to listen and follow his guidance. And then that led to so many other people being coming on my team that also believe and support why I'm doing this swim. And that's just how it came about.
Yeah, no, that's awesome because I mean, for me personally, what I found in swimming before like physical exhaustion, before outer judgment, before like anything else, the one thing that always pushed me back or the one obstacle that I always found difficult to face was the voice in my head telling me that I wasn't good enough. So, like you said, sometimes it's almost too much to confront that voice because you've manifested this image of yourself that is so convincing. So to have that external person come in, or like that coach figure, that parental figure, that friend who's like, no, you're actually not that. That's super important. And it like I can only imagine how it felt to finally have someone like Larry who, you know, like you mentioned, open armed, accepted you, believed you when you never had that before. I think that's incredible. And I think it's important for people to listen to that because, you know, there are people who shut down because of stuff that happened to them, or there are people that just are convinced that they're not worth anybody's time. So that one person to just go, "Hey, you want to talk about it?" Like that could make that could move mountains for people.
Yeah, I'm actually getting water, like tears in my eyes as you say that because it's like for 2 years I isolated myself. I opened up and trusted literally the wrong people with what happened with me. And then I don't know what it was within my body or within my heart or within my mind of I picked up my phone and I was like, I just didn't know why I reached out to him. Like I haven't spoken to him in years. I knew him when I was a little girl, through cycling and stuff like that, because him and my mom did some events for raising money for kids with cancer. And something just clicked of like, all right, you've known him since you were 9. You can trust him. And honestly, like growing up through life, I always looked up to him. He was just like this inspiring, motivated athlete that would just do anything, like run, cycle, be very motivational with speaking and stuff like that. Of just I don't know, trying to do good things to improve other people. And I just like that vibe of him. And I remember I seen like a Facebook post back in 2014 of something about him doing this like epic run of I think it was like an ultra marathon or something of I don't know like 80K or whatever. So I saw that and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna be that guy one day. And like that seems like naive to say, but I always chased after him in a sense growing up. So I ran my first marathon when I was 16, and tried to do like these big things that he was doing, and told myself like maybe one day, like if he did race across America, maybe I could follow those footsteps. Like I never grew up with a parental figure, in my life, like a father figure. It used to be my wrestling coach, and then unfortunately that changes, so you have nobody to turn to. And I always looked up to him growing up. And um, something clicked in February where I was like, you know what? You've known him since you're a little girl. You might have not talked for a long period of time, but you know him and what the journey he's been through and the advocacy he's done for mental health. So something clicked where I messaged him on Instagram and I said, "Are you free to talk?" And within like 2 minutes, he was like, "Hey, like, how are you?" And I'm like, "I'm okay. Like, can we have a conversation?" He's like, "Yeah, I'll give you a call in 5 minutes." So it's like for you not to hear from somebody for years and you're reaching out for help for them to respond right away, that was like, oh shit, like maybe I am important. And then for him to believe in me, and to see purpose in me and potential, basically gave me a vouch for meaning and purpose in life. And what he always tells me with this swim is like his goal with me and his purpose in helping me is to just basically put my energy elsewhere but in a positive way. So how can I take my negative energy and change it into a positive energy? Like he's not he's not like a father figure and like basically gonna coddle me or this or that. Like he is blunt, he's direct, he says it as it is. And if he has to have those hard moments with me to put me in my place, he will. But he also wants to see me grow and be a better person and not let my trauma um, define who I am, but to take that experience and use it to make my life better and to be a better Coralee because of what happened. Because if I walk around playing the victim card, I'm always going to remain a victim. But if I take what happened with me and share it with people, or but in a positive way where I'm not describing what happened, then people can look up to me and say, you know what, she went through similar to what I went through. She went from being rock bottom to swimming across Great Lakes to swimming at university to graduating hopefully at university. And she changed her life around through this one person. But if Larry was never there, I probably wouldn't be in school on a university swim team, wouldn't be swimming Great Lakes. So in a way, you have to find one person that believes in you and wants to invest in you. That's just how it worked.
Yeah, no, shout out to Larry, man. That's incredible. Um, you actually just mentioned it, and this is kind of my last question for you, Coralie, because I know you have to go to practice in like an hour. So first of all, sorry, because that's gonna hurt. But you mentioned like when people who are going through similar situations that you went through, when they see your journey, you hope that they're inspired by, like, you went to this part and now you're crossing Great Lakes and you're on a university swim team. If you were in a room with these people who are going through something similar, because unfortunately that's the reality, like we saw the gymnasts, you already mentioned that, and like it happens in wrestling, it happens in swimming, happens in most sports, unfortunately, like there's just terrible shitty people who have positions of power out there. And this just happens too often. But if you were sitting in a room with people who are experiencing things that you experience, like what would be the one thing that you would try to tell them, if you were face to face?
That like in a way, like whatever happened to you, first and foremost, like in a way, like don't blame yourself, don't bully yourself for what happened to you. Um, it's not your fault. Like literally, it's not that scumbag who hurt you in essence, but in a way, like try and pull on like those small little threads of hope to get you through the end of the dark tunnel. If reporting is something that you can do, report. If you can't, that's okay. Like whatever decision you make to make you feel better about yourself, that's all that matters at the end of the day. And reach out to one person that you can trust and confide in that can help you, like the person you reach out to, like you can tell them everything or you can just tell them, I don't know, just the generic version. And to be honest, like with my mentor, we don't talk about my trauma because that just makes it worse for me personally. So it's like I have a bad day, I reach out, say, you know what, I had a bad day, and he will change the conversation. He's like, so you had a bad day, but what good happened in that day? And he changes the conversation, or he'll talk about work, or he'll talk about, I don't know, just random stuff to distract myself from what I'm going through. So, in a way, like, yeah, you'll have support network, but it's really good how some people can change the conversation, to make it better. But yeah, for those who went through, I don't know, domestic abuse, sexual violence, shit with their coaches, like honestly, like I commend all their bravery to even like speak out against their coaches. And if they're not in a place where they can, know like you can reach out to teammates or a close friend. For me, I wasn't able to go to teammates or close friends or family for the matter of fact, because unfortunately, when it gets out in the sport, it just spreads like wildfire. But yeah, like if you're struggling, like reach out. There's helplines. You can go to the hospital. There's stuff out there to get you help and support. You just have to see it. to get it.
I love it. Yeah, great words of advice from Coralee. If people who are listening want to follow your journey crossing Great Lakes, or they're, I believe you're doing like you're raising money for jack.org, like where can people find these links and find you?
So like if you were to look at my Instagram bio, the link for the donations there. And then I can add people to my email list and just send out emails and stuff like that. I'm pretty big on social media right now for my crossing. So
Awesome. Perfect. So I'll put your Instagram and I'll put those links down in the description below. Coralee, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate you and the story that you're sharing because it's incredibly important to share. Like that people need to hear this stuff. So thank you so much for your bravery for opening up. I really appreciate it.
thank you.
And to all my listeners, I will see you guys next time.